Welcome, low ego action heroes. This is Debbie Levitt from Delta CX, and holy cats, it's the last show of the calendar year. Wow, where did the year go? Where did the last 3 years go? I don't want to hear the answer. Hi, everybody. It's office hours. Ask M anything. That would be Ask Me Anything, but of course, we do have a special guest today for the last magic of the year, and we do have a question already ahead of time. So if you want to get your question answered, check out deltacx.com/links for the way to send in your question anonymously, or I will be checking the chat room, both YouTube and Twitch if anyone's watching, and what's that thing called? LinkedIn. That abomination of mankind, LinkedIn. So before we continue, let me quickly thank everybody who's been donating to the channel. I ate many delicious chocolate chips today. Thank you for that. Thank you for keeping me in all kinds of delicious things. And in fact, over on our Slack channel, I was just talking about how much money the channel has made for the entire year, since I am transparent about that. We made less money in advertising than I donated to charity. So that one ended up that way. And then between the memberships and the super chats and the super stickers and the super thanks, I made $1,772 for the year. So thank you to everybody for buying me chocolate chips and streaming software and probably a few tanks of gas. So there you go. That is the YouTube transparency report for 2022. All right, which is why it's still not my full-time job. So let's welcome John N.A. Brown, who of course is with us usually every other month, but you know, it was a great opportunity to bring him back. John, for people who don't know you, tell us about you.
Oh, I'm just this guy, you know.
Hi, guy.
Oh, I guess I should say more than that. Sorry, I was trying to quote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Um, Let me see. I'm an old man who's been at this for a long time. Oh, hi, Elvina. Uh, I'm an old man who's been at this for a long time, by which I mean UX, not podcasting or live streaming or any of those commercial enterprises. Um, Yeah, I have too many university degrees and too much experience with too many big companies. I've also worked in academia and in government. I've written a few books that have been published by Springer, and I have long, rambling answers to really simple questions that I should have prepared for.
Wow. It's a ditto, except for everything that you said until long rambling answers. So, yes, welcome back. And ask your questions, everybody. I will be watching all of the ways to send things in. Let's see. This is spam email. So, okay, I'm not getting any questions that way yet. Hi, Malika. Hi, Alvina. Okay, so let's pull up the first question we got. It is people love to use the anonymous system to send us their long stories, which we approve. So let me read this one out loud, and then we'll see what our thoughts are. And of course, if you're watching live, you are welcome to add your thoughts and advice to people's questions as well. Okay, this says, I'm a UX researcher, and the place I work for tends to be the most interested in high-spend enterprise users because that's where they see the most value. But whenever our recruiters try and reach out to these people, either directly or through our internal connections, we rarely get a response. However, responses from lower spend enterprise users are much easier to come by. How would you suggest dealing with this? Part of me feels like it's wrong to dismiss lower spend users of our tool for research just because they're not big and don't have that much money. Couldn't we help grow them? But it's also frustrating to rarely get a hold of the large companies, and whenever we can snag a large company for the interviews, it's always the same names, so I feel
I think you're right in pointing out that there could be value in speaking with other people than the ones who uh, are the highest value to speak with. So that's one issue. So being unable to speak to the folks you're told to speak to is one issue. And the subgroup there mentioned at the end, if you can only talk to a few of them, is that actually representative of anything? It's another issue. A further issue is this idea that if there are other people you could speak to, other categories of people that you could speak to, would that be better than speaking to no one? Could there still be some value there? Yes, absolutely there could. You just have to be careful about what kind of value you're getting and how you interpret it. So I think that there are several other issues raised in this very long message, but maybe we'll start with those three. So if you can't get a response from the people you're being told to study, sometimes the best approach is to find a different way to study them. So a different way to study them can involve a number of different things, depending on your own personal skills and personal preferences as a UX researcher. If you have a couple of people at that company who are responsive, or a couple of branches of that company, or however it was it breaks down for you, if there are people you communicate with whom you have communicated before, and if you are comfortable in doing so, you could ask them to write a log for you. So rather than doing the kind of observational interview that I've assumed that you're trying to recruit people for, or cognitive walkthrough or something like that, ethnographic style interview. Instead of doing that, you could ask them for a simple log or some kind of a diary study, depending on how much they're willing to put into it. In this way, you also separate the type of data you're collecting from them from the other types of data that your company might be expecting you to collect. So instead of looking for statistical significance, for instance, or pretending you can look for statistical significance when you only have a few people answering, instead you can treat them as the specialized sources of information that they are. So that's one thing that you can do to deal with those first two issues. To deal with the third issue, this issue of whether or not you could speak to the other group, the folks who work at a different financial or perform at a different financial level. Yeah, absolutely do that. But please try to build up your data pools to show the difference in the data. So not just according to the different financial types, but also maybe according to things like how severe it is. So if people operating at a very different financial level than the ones that your bosses have decided you should focus on, if they're finding some critical issues in the use of the software that you create or the service you create, those probably carry over at any financial level. So that kind of thing you can absolutely do. I hope that makes some sense. Try to prioritize separating the data that you can get into different categories, not just based on the dynamics you're already using and the stratifications you're already using, but also based on the severity of the issues. If you find out that some of the software just flatly isn't working on certain devices, your company will be happy to know that, regardless of who you found it out from.
Good point. Yeah, that's certainly on that evaluative side. So, yeah, I certainly can't disagree with that. So, one of the things that occurred to me when I saw this was just to maybe have some more conversations about your segmentation, because you seem to have the large enterprise people and the low dollar enterprise people. But ultimately, when you put the low dollar people together, what percentage of the revenue do they make up? Is it 2%, so nobody cares? Is it 20% when you put together all the little peeps? So I wonder if the little peeps are a semi-significant slice of what's going on there, and that would be the way maybe to try to get them more involved in some of the research rather than looking at the individual person and I'd say, oh, they only spend $10,000 a year with us, that's so small, but they represent this bucket or segment that is some more noticeable percentage. So I would say maybe take a look at that. Oh, Linda's here and she says, welcome back. I was once an editor for Springer back when book publishers could eke out a small profit.
Hi, Linda. I'd like to build on what you were just saying there, Debbie, in response to that question. Not
Please.
to cut short our greetings of Linda, because it's a pleasure that she's here. Another issue that comes up here in relation to what you're saying is sorry, not another issue, the issue that you've raised there about what proportion of the actual income is represented by these smaller enterprises, even though each individual one is giving less to your company, maybe together they're significant. Please consider what happened a few years ago to YouTube, what happened a few years, then partway through in reaction to the loss of a couple of major advertisers. So maybe consider that. If you're interested, if you can speak with your bosses about directions, if it's a kind of company where you can do that, that wouldn't be a bad tool to give to a manager who's already user research friendly, or even who's just survival friendly. If you can give that to somebody at the management level, maybe they can take that to the board or to the other people to say, hey, let's keep harvesting from many fields instead of focusing on one or two.
Groovy. Thank you for adding that. Okay, let's take a look at the next question. And I have been adding all the questions coming into the list, so we're going in order. This question says, do you have any tips or advice for doing a high quality competitor analysis? And I think the emphasis there is on high quality.
Wow. Do you want to tackle this one first, Debbie? I'm not a huge fan of competitor analysis, and I can go
Okay,
into the details, but I don't want to sidetrack people.
I'm not either, but sure, I can go for that. And anonymous question, who works for the UX agency, I see your question coming in, and I'm going to put you on the list. We have a few before you, so please be patient. Okay, so competitor analysis. Now, there's a few different reasons to do competitor analyses. So I think the first would be, why are we doing this? Do we just want to know what else is going on out there? Do we just want to be hip to the new features they've released? Are we trying to copycat the competitor? So I think we have to take a look at why we're doing it, because I'm not against companies being aware of what the Mr. and Mrs. Jones next door are doing and you know what's happening. But I find that some companies get over into. I think there's a chapter in my now infamous online course about how to hire CX and UX people. And I super poop on Workday, who I think has one of the worst user experiences in the modern era. And they had like 1 million jobs on LinkedIn at the time, and they were all for competitor analysis, literally full-time jobs, like 3 people competitor analysis. And my thought was, you suck. And customers know you suck. Like, you know, stop looking at the competitors, fix your own house. So for me, I think a mistake with competitor analysis is what I see in a lot of boot camps and courses. People just make a table and they say, does the competitor have this feature? Yes, no. But I remind people, and it's also in the book and I say it here, there is a concept and there is the execution of the concept. You know, Disney World is an execution of a concept. Six Flags Great Adventure is an execution of a similar concept. Gardaland is an execution of a similar concept. So there's concepts and there's executions of concepts. McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, Carl's Jr., different executions of a similar concept. So I think just having a check mark and saying these people have it and these people don't isn't really enough information. When I worked at Macy's and we used to do quarterly competitive analyses of a handful of apps and websites that we had our eye on, we screenshot the hell out of them and we documented step by step what they had done and what was different from the last time we looked at them. But the interesting thing was, and this is another reason to not copycat, sometimes we would do the next quarter's analysis and something we screenshot last quarter was gone. And then we said, oh, failed experiment. You know, A/B test where A won, you know, but I saw B. So remember, just because a competitor has something in their system doesn't mean it's great, doesn't mean it's working for them, doesn't mean you should copy it. Be aware of it, screenshot the hell out of it, know about it, think about it. But I think to me, the high quality competitor analysis would be to screenshot the hell out of something, think critically about what may or may not be working for that competitor, and don't play copycat, because not only is playing copycat sad, but it's certainly not innovation and it's certainly not disruption in a company that's probably spreading a lot of BS saying we have to be innovative and disruptive. And that is the rant
Here,
from
here.
me. John, what do you want to add to that?
Boy, nice rant, Debbie.
Why, thank you.
I'd like to add a bit to it. I agree with all of the things, all of the things, as often happens when we're talking. I would go even further and say if you have to do competitor analysis, regardless of whether or not your company is going to allow you to do high quality work, if you have to do it, then thinking carefully and mapping changes over a long time is a vital part of that, because without doing those steps that you mentioned, um, you're not actually doing competitor analysis. You might be creating a checklist like one of those tables that Debbie just referenced, but you won't be doing analysis. Analysis means taking the data, processing the data, and finding truths inside the data. And if all you're doing is building a checklist, you're not finding any truth. If you analyze it over time and look for where is the sign of the failed A/B test or the past A/B test, where are the things that they have learned, then you can get a sense of how your competitors are moving through time. And that's valuable, but it certainly shouldn't inform your own designs. It can help inform your strategies based on how that company responds to different things that are impacting them. So strategic information can be derived from that. That's good. But if you're imitating interactions or other design elements from people you are studying in this way, then you're making a mistake that's sometimes called surfing the last wave. So you're out on your board and you're getting ready to ride in, and before you ride in, you watch the people ahead of you go. And you do a competitor analysis on how they're handling it and how they're riding that wave. And then when your wave comes along, do you think it's good to imitate everything that they did? They were on a different wave at a different time, under different circumstances. And a lot of the circumstances are the same. I mean, you're still involved in the same tide unless there's been a catastrophic event. And you're probably going towards the same shore unless you're in a tide pool somewhere that's facing the wrong way. Anyhow, the point is, don't surf the wave that you've observed. Observe so that you can prepare to surf the wave that you're on. That requires analysis, and you're not doing a competitor analysis of any quality if you're not building in analysis.
I need some sort of super zen sound when you say some one of those extra deep things. Hold on, I think I have one. There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the sound of my ego crashing against the roof when you praise me. So.
Oh, surely not. Elvina had a follow-up question that I'm going to throw in here right now because it's relevant, and then we'll get to the other questions. And Elvina said, well, does it make sense to look at the UX solutions and the UI design solutions that competitors have for a specific user problem? And I feel like we've kind of answered that, because you can look at them, but you have to be careful how much you end up being influenced by them, because again, they may or may not have the same users, they may or may not have the same problem, their solution is usually garbage, as Larry Marine will happily tell you. And so look all you want, but be careful, because even something that's pretty might not be a good solution, and target audiences aren't always the same. I fought with a lot of people at Macy's who the product managers just wanted me to rip off Kohl's and rip off, Americans will know these stores, sorry, people outside of America. They wanted me to rip off Kohl's, they wanted me to rip off eBay, and I was like, okay, Kohl's is almost a close competitor to Macy's, but eBay? Like, are you sure this is the Macy's shopper the eBay shopper? I'm sure there's a Venn diagram overlap here, but, the Macy's website isn't the eBay website. Let's think more critically here, and they didn't want that.
Here.
Anything to add?
Yeah, yes, I think you made the Venn diagram overlap a little bit too much. But no, I like the illustration, and I agree with the answer. By all means, look and be informed. But if you'll pardon my putting on my anthropology hat for just a moment, and I wish I could reach over and put on a hat, but I'd have to leave the room. Thank you. I'm not sure which branch of anthropology that is, but we'll say popular culture studies. Thinking about it as an anthropologist and somebody who has studied tool use and tool development, There are two phases that a tool goes through when somebody is trying to find a better way to do something. And one of them is the innovation of coming up with a tool that's useful, or a modification to an old tool in order to make it more useful or more safe, or to make it useful in a new situation. That's one thing. The other thing is the spreading of that tool to different circumstances. So the tool is created and then it spreads, it goes into use. And if it goes into use under enough different circumstances, then you find people saying, this is no good here. I mean, it's better than using my bare hands or my teeth, but not much. How can I improve this? And you get people innovating on the tool. So if you've ever owned a saw for sawing wood, the shape of the cuts in the blade are different if you're sawing along the grain of the wood or across the grain of the wood. And that's because people realized, hey, in some cases we want a bite that works a certain way, and in other cases we want a bite that works a different way. All right? That innovation doesn't happen with imitation. Learning that you could also have a saw happens with imitation. Figuring out how to make a better saw cannot happen if you're slavishly devoted to imitating what others have done. And that's a big problem in Silicon Valley and around the world. All of those people, all of those managers who say, make me something that looks like eBay, make me something that looks like Twitter. They should be saying, how could we improve on eBay? How could we improve on Twitter?
How do we be more customer centric and build what our freaking customers actually need? So, okay, cool. Yes, thank you. Thanks. Next question. This was one we botched last week, and the asker was nice enough to re-ask it for today. So this question is it okay to implement primary and secondary research just to talk about backing up the creation of a design that was already made? I did a past internship where I was given a UX role, but the projects I was given were only UI projects for management. I went back and added interviews and secondary research just to bring something UX about it.
Went back meaning
I get the feel I'm seeing this from some people who I'm coaching. They had a crappy real project that they realized doesn't make the best portfolio case study. And so on their own time and of their own volition, and person who asked this, I think you're here, tell me if I'm getting this story right. And instead of just putting this kind of sad project in their portfolio where it was just I did the UI they told me to make, they're saying, you know what, I'm just going to go back and redo some of this work so that I have a better case study and portfolio project. And then it sounds like they might be doing that to see if the design they ended up making was a good one.
Wonderful. Thanks for the clarity.
That's what I think. Person who asked, let me know how I did.
Well, it does tie in with the question we had the last time I was here as well. A similar question about can you add to your portfolio by modifying assignments that you were given in order to pretend that they were actually decent assignments? The answer is, of course, yes, it's your portfolio. Of course you can. Especially, in my opinion, especially if you say, here is the work that I was given and what came out of it. And you can show a screenshot or something and you can talk about what informed the different pieces. And then raise the questions there about whether or not it could have been better informed by more research activities. Then conduct the research and show the changes you made. This is beautiful because this isn't just showing screenshots. This is showing this you went through. What kind of research informed the choices you made? What kind of sample did you get? How did the data present itself and how did you extract that data? How did you figure out where and when to apply it? So these are great things to do. If you don't have real work that can build up a portfolio, by all means, identify the work that you did, identify the limitations of it, and identify where you would do the work differently if you could. That's a decent portfolio piece. That's a good reflective portfolio piece. You go and actually conduct some research in order to complement that. That's a great portfolio piece. Or it has the potential to be.
I'm going to jump in and roll right over you and say, but
Please,
there's
but
a part of that question we have to react a little bit strongly to, and you may or may not agree. But it sounds like they're looking to do research to back up the creation of the design that was already
yeah,
made. So remember that your research should be solution agnostic. If you're doing usability testing on this design, don't prove that the design was good. Check if the design solves the original problem. Check if the design works well. See where the design needs improvements. Do not design the test that will prove that the design was okay, or, well, it kind of sucks, but people made it through. I guess it's good enough. Do not design any generative research that tries to prove that I found some people who probably need this thing we made. So I think that if you are going to circle back, because it's a mistake I see a lot. So I think that if you are going to circle back and try to raise the quality of the work that you did and show a better UX process, make sure you are doing a better UX process and you're not accidentally just manipulating your research to prove that what you ended up designing was okay. I would be thrilled to pieces if your case study says, now that I've done this research, it looks like the design might not be the best for our users. Here's the design I would have done instead if I had this research to guide me. And John says thumbs up.
brava, brava,
Grazie.
absolutely. Prego. The key point that Debbie is making there is the one that I was trying to make in my earlier statement, where I kept talking about portfolio piece. Portfolio piece. If you are trying to do this in reality, if you are trying to say, we've done research, we've got these ideas, or we've got these ideas with or without research, and now we're going to go and do some research that's looking back on that to see whether or not we did the right thing. You are not being a scientist. Because ever since the work of Karl Popper that I, yes, exactly. Ever
Shame,
since the
shame.
work of Karl Popper that I referenced last time I was here, we know that it's a better scientific method to disprove than to prove. If you have a theory, you try to prove your theory wrong, not try to prove it right. If you're trying to prove it right, you're literally doing things that are impossible to get wrong. If you're trying to prove your theory wrong, then you've got a significant chance of uncovering either that it's wrong or that it's truly right. Okay, this is why modern scientific techniques, and when I say modern, I don't mean in the last 6 months. I'm not a Kardashian. Uh, when I say modern, what I'm talking about is within the last 80 years or so. We know that disproval of hypotheses is much more scientifically sound. And I'd love to go into a long discussion of this, but I know that everything would probably fall asleep unless you're a history of science nerd like I am. So, yeah, if you're actually trying to validate the work that you did, do your best to prove that it's wrong. And not in a harassing way, right? In a rigorous scientific way. Test the alternatives, test the things that are there in a way that is aiming to having them proven wrong. And if they pass those tests, then you've got rigorous data that they're good, right? So this is really important, and it is a mistake that I can't say every company I've ever worked for, and every government agency I've ever worked for, and every school I've ever worked for. I can't say all of them get it wrong, but if I were to say all of them get it wrong, the ones who don't would have a hard time wading through the sea of those who do.
Yes, and I can tell you, I've seen a few portfolios where people were like, this was the idea that I wanted to make. And so then I did some research and, I found that my idea might not be a good one, but I'm pretty sure it's good, so I'm going to keep going with it. And then I'm like, that's somebody I don't want to interview. Like that's not UX at that point. To me, UX is scientific. UX is objective. It's solution agnostic. It doesn't matter if your idea was right or wrong. You're going to come out with something better at the end if you let yourself. So let yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, here. I mean, it's important to remember that if you're trying to do work scientifically, whether it's rigorous experimentation work or just thinking about problems scientifically, it's really important to be, as Debbie is saying, solution agnostic. it's really important to see that any idea you have is a stepping stone. These are stepping stones that you use to move forward towards a better refinement of the idea and greater knowledge. But at no point should you say, hey, I like that idea, I'm done looking. Right? At that point, what you're doing is you're developing something like faith instead of something like knowledge.
And scene. Okay, so let me put up the next question, which came in anonymously, and it says, I work for a UX agency. We sometimes have clients who have limited budgets. When putting together the proposal, our salesperson tries to fit the cost to a client's budget by asking me to reduce some hours of work or even activities I'm suggesting. I don't feel like I should do it. I don't want to compromise on quality. At the same time, I understand that we as a business don't want to lose clients because they can't afford us. Do you have any advice on what I could do in situations like these? Thank you.
Wow. Not only a question, but also a polite finish. Yeah, the best advice I can give you, something that I've had to do in the past, is to make up a table or a list, a spreadsheet, if you will, a flow chart, if you must. Make up a source for your salespeople to look at, approved by management before you get to the salespeople. Make up a source that says, here is the cost in hours of doing these different kinds of work. And you can have the different kinds of work you can do. The intensity to which they can be done can be the cross line, the columns to the rows. And you can have intersections showing how many hours that would. So if you want to have a survey sent out, well, it costs this much to design and run and send out a survey depending on how many people you're sending it to. The initial cost is much higher. It spreads out quite a bit as you send it to more people because the initial cost stays the same. Doing interviews, the more people you send it to, the more the cost grows, right? So the more people you involve in interviews. So you can have this table that basically, and you probably want to keep it really simple for most salespeople, try to have it no more than 3 or 4 rows and 3 or 4 columns, even if the master list you have is 100 in each direction. But once you've built that master list, and once you and your supervisor, or you and your manager, or you and whoever in administration is involved in what you do, above you and sales, preferably, if not, then at your level first, and then inclusive of sales afterwards, create a document that everyone can agree to, do the work you have to do to get everybody on board of that. And then when sales says, yeah, they want to drop the price. So I told them you can do 3 different kinds of cognitive walkthroughs with 14 different people. But what I'd like you to do is spend less time on it. Well, you can say, no, we've got the table. For one thing, 3 different kinds of cognitive interviews. Screw you for deciding that as a salesperson. You don't know anything about it. But for another thing, if you're making the suggestion that we should do bad quality, then I want that called out in a way that doesn't make it an argument between me and the salesperson. I wanted a disagreement between the salesperson and our company's standards. So create a document that sets those standards out, get people to buy into it, change it as you need to, make sure it's something that represents your truth and the company's belief, and then you don't have to have those arguments anymore.
And thank you. And here's what I wanted to add to that, and that is, okay, so you're concerned that your company might not do the right research or enough research because we're trying to fit into people's budgets. So what I would probably do is work with, and it sounds like the sales team is working with you. So right there, that's a beautiful thing, because very often, as John was hinting, the sales team or account managers are just making stuff up and pricing things out, and they're not working with you. So make sure they are working with you and that you get to estimate your own time. I would probably try to come in with something that is in the client's budget, and then I would tell sales, account management, whoever it is, Here's what we won't have done, here's what we're going to cut out because of this budget. And these are the potential risks to the client and to this project. If you're only going to give me enough time to interview 3 people when I should be meeting 14, here's the problem that could run. And we could end up looking bad later because the client will think, you did interviews, right? Why didn't you have better information? Because they don't understand the difference between 3 and 14. So what I would probably do with sales is say, okay, here's something at the client's budget, but for this much more time and money, this would be the better way to go. I only need 3 more weeks, and I only need 3 more weeks, and I only need 10,000, 20,000, 3,000, whatever it is. I don't know what anybody bills in whatever country, but I would probably say, look, here's the at the client's budget version, and here's the just over the client's budget version. And let's please offer both to the client, because I think if we can convince them of the importance of adding a little bit more time and a little bit more money, everybody wins. We'll do a better job, we'll make a little bit more money, and they'll be much happier with the outcome. With the skimped one, we run the risk that they're not happy with the outcome and they think we're not good at what we do. So that's what I've typically done in these situations. I remember last year, the job I was at last summer, about almost a year and a half ago, we had a couple of clients who were like, whoa, we've got end of fiscal year money to use, and we've got about this. And so I said, okay, here's my proposal for this, but here's my proposal if you have 10 or so % more than that. And they loved the second proposal more. They were like, we're going to go ask for that money. So you never know.
Nice.
Sometimes they'll say yes, and sometimes they'll say, sorry, that's our budget, we'll go with the lower version. And you say, hey, as long as you're aware of the risk of that, okay, I did my best.
Hear, hear. I think especially with that clear communication, right? The idea of trying to sell up, and any company you're working for should like the idea that you're showing an easy rationale for selling up. That's great, especially if it's a valid rationale. Then good on you, you're doing good work. But the other side of that, I think, is the more important one. Express the risk. Here is what we do for these different amounts of money. That's it. Here is the limitations of those things. So if you're trying to undercut, or if they're trying to negotiate you down, then just understand there is such and such percentage chance that we will not find issues, or that issues we miss, because you won't ever find all the issues, but you exponentially increase the likelihood that you will not find important issues by cutting down the number of iterations you do, or the number of people you interview, or things like that. There's lots and lots of work out there explaining the spread. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I interrupted. I was just going to say that it's a good conversation in general to have with sales and possibly some of the leadership here of when do we say no to a project? When is the budget so low? Because over here at Delta CX, we do say no to a lot of projects. In fact, I tell the story in the book. I don't know if anybody got that far, but I tell the story in the book of, early on in the pandemic, a famous American car company came to me and some other researchers and said, we really need to understand what's going on with our potential customers in this pandemic. What kind of research can you do? And we scoped something out, and it was 140,000 American dollars, which, this company, if they sold 20 more cars, they would have made that back. And they came back to us and they said, we love the proposal. We love the project. It's exactly what we want. What can you do for 40,000? And we said, nothing. It wasn't worth it to us to cut the project down to 1/3 of what we had suggested. If they had said, ooh, 140,000, ooh, that's a little high, what can you do for 110 or whatever, we probably would have reworked it and said, okay, we'll cut this, and you just have to understand you're not going to know that. But when they cut it that far, we said no. So I think another good question to have within your company, not with the client, but at what point do we say no because we're worried that we're not going to give people enough information, usable information? We were worried that cutting that project down to 1/3 was not going to give this company really significant knowledge about new perceptions and behaviors early in the pandemic related to car. How do you car shop when you're locked down?
Yeah, it's such a lovely story, and I'm glad you set those standards. I wish more did.
It's in there. It's in there somewhere. Who knows what page it is?
It 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 is important to remember, though, that the tipping point for the value wasn't the amount of money they were offering; it was the amount of data that would find. Right? So
Yep.
you weren't saying, no, we don't want to make $40,000 intake
Right.
because we can't that well between us. You were saying, for what we could do for $40,000, the project is not worth running because
Right.
the
You won't be
knowledge will
happy.
not be rich enough, or certain enough.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
And that's the thing about research. It's not buying rice or beans, right? It's buying the seeds for rice or beans. It's buying something that has to be planted and cultivated and then harvested and processed. There we go again.
That's going to be your
Right? But
sound.
that's an important part. It's an important part about that exchange, right? Too many people think about it directly in terms of money or has worked. And no, the point of research is to find things out. And if you do less of it, then the amount you can learn drops off significantly and quickly and harshly. And the amount you can infer and the amount you can know with greater or lesser certainty, it all becomes less certain.
And remember, you can always use the old sales tactic of low, medium, high, where low is their budget, medium is 15% over it, and high is 50% over it. Like, you know what? If you had 50% over your budget, we could do this really amazing thing. We would know so much more. It would be so much better out of the gate. And then many people, psychologically speaking, many people end up picking the middle. So you might say, this is what we can do for 15% over your budget. And they might go, that's interesting. What can you do for 10% over our budget? So, that's up to your sales team to negotiate, but I would work with them on that type of thing. Okay, we've got two more questions. This one says, do we always need to do usability testing? And I kind of want to flip that question around and say, when don't we need to do usability testing?
Hear, hear. Great answer. Yes, by all means, flip it around, because if the use of it isn't important, then I guess you don't need to test the use of it. Many years ago, I was working on input devices, alternatives to the computer mouse and touchpad and things like that. And I was speaking at a conference, and I was explaining that this invention I'd come up with greatly reduced, or seemed to greatly reduce, the risk of developing carpal tunnel syndrome and other things. And somebody said, but how can you reduce it completely? How can you completely remove the risk of carpal tunnel syndrome?
Stop typing. Stop.
So I was, I'm standing in front of a conference lecture hall of experts, all of them with more experience than me. So I said, well, the mouse that has no risk at all of hurting you has already been invented. It's called the pillow. Apply it to your head and go to sleep, and you will not hurt yourself mousing. However, the usability of it as a mouse is of a very, very poor quality. You will not get a lot of mousing done when you're using that pillow. But you said 100% certain for lack of injury caused by mousing. So everything is a balance, right? Thank you.
I was late on that one. Sorry.
It's okay. You were too busy laughing to react. That's
I was
best.
too busy just swimming in it. Thank you for that. I would say my parallel answer is you don't need to do usability testing when we don't care if this is a good product for customers. If we don't care if customers can use this, if we don't care if it's easy to learn and easy to use, if we don't care if it solves people's problems, then don't do usability testing. You don't have to do usability testing, but I I would want to see it part of every project, and preferably at least 2 rounds, not just one, at least two. So yes, I would say you always need usability testing unless you genuinely don't care if it's usable for the intended audience. If nobody cares if this is usable or not, then that would be one reason to just release it. Another reason would be risk. If we don't care about the risk that we might have to fix this product later or roll it back or undo it, if we don't care about that risk and we don't mind burning time later and having customer support deal with angry people, and if we don't care about any of that, sure, don't do usability testing. Just let it go out there and let broken crap go out there. In fact, what I like to tell people is if we don't want to do usability testing, let's also skip software QA. If you don't want to do usability testing, that was one of the lines that Jared Spool stole from me. Oh, why? Why does he do it? Well, I know why he does it.
Because it's a great line.
Thank you. So I said, hey, if we really want to be fast, we don't need QA. If the goal is to just be fast and fail fast, ship broken things, fix it later, then save even more time and money and don't bother with QA. Assume that your developer's coding is probably good enough and just put it out there.
Yeah, it's a terrifying thought when you start to extrapolate this notion to other aspects of the business. But I support everything you just said, Debbie, and I would even add maybe one more dimension of whether or not you should be scared, or maybe two more dimensions of whether or not you should be scared to skip this without testing. Is your job secure when this fails? Because if people at whatever other point in the company are saying, just hurry the testing or just don't do the testing, is your job going to be secure when it fails and testing would have uncovered it and it's obvious that testing would have uncovered it? Because if your job isn't secure, yeah, exactly. Fight for it or get the people pushing it to sign off. I've done that before at board meetings where I've gone in and said, hey, whoever is championing that we go too fast, in my opinion, all I need is for you to put your name on, this is how fast we must go. You put your name on that here in front of God and everybody, and I'll happily stop objecting. And next quarter, when you've been replaced, I'll talk about this with the person who takes your job.
Ooh,
right? This is
saucy.
Pretty straightforward. So, but I mean, I've literally said that at board meetings. The other half is if the product that you're shipping has the possibility of harming someone, the user or someone nearby. So, for example, if you are doing autonomous driving cars, and you have reached the point where you know the car cannot differentiate between an unknown obstacle it should stop for and an unknown obstacle it doesn't need to stop for, then you are absolutely wrong to send that out into the street, regardless of what kind of testing you call it, right? If you know that the people driving your cars believe that they don't have to drive, but you know that they should keep their attention on the road, then you need to make that part of the statement of every pitch you do for self-driving. There was a story a few decades ago when cruise control was new. You all know cruise control. I don't know if it's still called that, but that's the little button you switch so that your speed will stay relatively constant regardless of the terrain you're on. You don't need to work the gas anymore. It assumes you're on a highway and that nothing is in your way and no people are there because it can't sense other people, cars, mountains, things like that. So it's a great switch to have as an innovation 40 years ago. It's actually a really horribly dangerous tool. But the story I wanted to tell you is about a man who was driving a comment on dit ça alors?
I don't do
Winnebago, we
Portuguese.
used to say. What's the a motorhome? A motorhome.
Yeah.
Someone who was driving a motorhome, and he bought it knowing that it had this incredible cruise control. So on the highway, he turned on the cruise control and went to the back to lay down. Because his understanding was not what the company had been saying. Right? So usability testing really would have helped there. Really would have. Should we call it cruise control? Should we market it the way we're marketing it if the message isn't clear to the user?
Right. It's not autopilot.
Yes, exactly. And frankly, folks, autopilot these days isn't autopilot either. It's very high functioning. It does a lot of things really well. But look at the outlier cases. Look at the times that it crashes, that it hurts people or kills people or damages property.
Not worth it.
Those things have to be solved before you try implementing something in the real world.
Thank
Anyhow,
you. Yeah, thank you for that
thank
and the
you.
stories. We've got one last question, and then we'll do some wrap up for the year. Vicky asks, "What's the difference between an MVP and a prototype?"
Nice. I guess it depends on who you're asking.
That's true.
I've worked in companies before where the answer is where you can charge more for one of them. And I've worked in companies before where the answer is about 6 to 12 months. Minimal viable product means the minimum, or MVP means the product that you can sell. It works and you can do it. And actually, in some contexts, it means that you can sell. In others, it means that it's ready for testing. But a minimal viable product is something that is, you know, you can make it better, you know it can be improved, but you can start using it today. Whereas a prototype, in my opinion, is something that has been created for the purpose of eventually reaching a product, but hasn't become a product yet. So I've done a lot of prototyping in hardware and in software. To me, a prototype is what you've made on the way to creating the finished thing, whereas the MVP is the first version of the finished thing. Here's a Model A Ford. You know the next one will be better, but we can start selling this now, and the people who buy it will be able to use it. Here's the prototype of the Ford automobile, which needs a team of engineers to keep it rolling. Right? So to me, that's the difference.
And I agree that this question has many different answers based on who you ask. This actually came up in my book in chapter 21, off the top of my head, when I interviewed Steve Johnson about product management. And he said that there's a quote somewhere out there from Eric Ries, who wrote The Lean Startup, which is mostly where people fell in love with the whole MVP idea. And he said, he kind of got it wrong, but I also noticed he never circled back and fixed it. But he said the MVP shouldn't have been a product that we released to the public. It's too early. He said, I really should have said minimum viable prototype, not minimum viable product. It's usually not something that is ready to go out to the public. So what I tell people when I'm out speaking at like engineering conferences and places where at least some of the audience is probably in love with the MVP idea, I remind them that the best MVP is a UX prototype, because we don't have to have, in most cases, in some cases engineering has to code it, you just can't know until you see the real code. But in many cases, especially if we're using a more realistic prototyping tool like Axure, hashtag not sponsored, we can definitely create a very realistic prototype, take it through some great rounds of usability testing, make sure that it's not only usable and intuitive, but that it solves the original problem and that we're moving towards product market fit. And so I tell people that is the best way to de-risk your product and your project, and to still move relatively fast while making sure you're not burning cycles of engineering on what's really a guess. So I would say that there doesn't have to be a difference between the MVP and the prototype. The prototype can be the MVP. But again, people have different perspectives on this. Sometimes they don't care about the UX work and they think, let's just get the MVP product out there to people and see how people react. But as I point out in my book, we don't do that in any other industry. You wouldn't do that with a parachute. You know, we in pretty much every industry out there, we model things and test those models in over and over in many ways before we put that early alpha or beta out to the public. And for some reason, once we started throwing the word agile around, we gave that up. So I would say, to me, the best MVP is a UX prototype, because then engineering hasn't spent any time or money on code when it might be code of a crappy non-solution.
Yeah, hear, hear.
Something to
Hear, hear.
add?
Yeah, as soon as you introduce the idea that MVP could be minimal or maybe maximal viable prototype, so that now you're ready to start using it as a prototype. Yeah, then I agree. I've worked with a lot of companies where MVP is used specifically for the first thing you can sell, and
Which would be a
that makes it
full
a very
release. It's not an MVP. If you are selling this thing, it's not an MVP. And I think that's what the person I interviewed said, that Eric Ries said, like, this is not designed to be marketable or sellable. This is designed to be an early experiment.
yeah. It's just a shame he never went back and corrected that in the book that is a Bible to so many people who think they know how to run a business.
Yeah, that's why I'm always pooping on the lean startup, and then all the tech bros come out and tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, so there's that. And so I've got a bunch on that in my new book. So, of course, if anybody's interested, I've got a book. And yeah, thank you. And it's called Customers Know You Suck, and it's available now. Since I'm being asked, the audiobook is running quite late. Stop waiting for it. I'm hoping it will be ready closer to mid-January. I originally said I would try to have it out by Christmas, and that is not going to happen. Put it this way, a few days ago I had 11 chapters done, and as of today I have 4 chapters done. You do the math. So, I'm running
You
into
decided
some.
that the final product, you decided that the final product shouldn't be the minimum viable.
Well, you know, the jokes that I keep making with my little QA team is, considering one of the key messages of my book is good enough isn't good enough. I can't put out an audiobook with all kinds of mistakes in it. You know, okay, sure, there will be a couple of clicks and a couple of weird things, I'm sure, but like, it can't be, you know, you can't find 20 mistakes in every chapter. That is not good enough. So yeah, I've been having weeks of technical problems, but I might have actually slayed the dragon as of this morning. So, okay. So, John, thank you as always for coming. And of course, when the show ends, please stay on the line. I just want to chat with you. You have to wait about 10 seconds after the video runs for the stream to stop. So don't go yet. But any last words for just for the year, you know, any last 2022 words, and where can people find you?
Okay. These days, the easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn. If you go to LinkedIn, you will find my website very easily, and you will find my blog very easily. There will be more of me online soon, but that will come to light later on. For now, LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to find my blog and my website. Final words for the year. Yeah. Not to get all Christmassy, since I'm not of that faith, but be of good cheer. It's a good message. It's easy to be depressed when we're coming out of lockdown and going back into lockdown, when everybody knows someone who has been sick. And we've gone from that to nobody doesn't know anyone who's been sick. It's a depressing time, and overconfidence, false overconfidence expressed for the sake of trying to increase share values has led to horrible crashes in a lot of industries. It's hard to find a job right now. It's hard to find hope about finding a job right
Is
now.
this the uplifting message?
I'm getting to the uplifting part,
I hope so.
but first I want everyone to know that I'm with you. I know how bad things are. I really do. I'm with you right there. But the words I said at the beginning, be of good cheer. I encourage that. Stay optimistic, stay positive, in part because that will do beautiful biochemical things in your brain that will make life better for you and the people around you. But also, in part, because things will get better. They won't get better quickly, and they won't get better magically, and they won't get better for everyone. Unfortunately, we're a long time away from the days when things will get better for everyone. But they probably will get better for you. Be of good cheer, be hopeful, and work towards that hope. And it'll help if you're kind to the people around you, especially the ones who make you not want to be kind.
Thank you. Beautiful as always. So everybody, just in case you are a curious cat, office hours might return January. I'm still trying to figure out some of our scheduling. So it might be back January 3rd if possible. And if not, I'm still trying to figure out January 10th because that's when I start flying to America for my wedding. So just know that shows will be back in January. Schedule a little bit up in the air. Manuel says, love the words of encouragement. Sometimes it gets way too hard, but would keep on learning and growing. It'll get better. Yes, everybody keep joining us for the learning and laughs here on the Delta CX channel. So thanks to everybody who made 2022 a wacky year with a lot of good memories. And I'm going to play us out of here. Of course, I'll be in our Slack and Discord if you need my attention. You can join those for free at deltacx.com/links. And other than that, we'll see everybody in January. Happy holidays and Happy New Year. And happy everything to you, John. Thank you for coming.
And to you. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Happy New Year.
Customer centricity as business intelligence. Visit deltacx.com to learn why we are